We had a discussion in committee that was referenced by Council President Katz related to the School Resource Officer Program. I think similar to comments that have been made by myself, but also other colleagues, we are in a unique moment in history, and the issues around how we reimagine public safety and what that looks like in the context of our school buildings, where the primary function and responsibility of schools is to educate children and keep them in a welcoming, safe environment with the resources they need. The data is clear on SROs. Over the last 4 years, of the students that have been arrested by SROs, over half of them are Black students, even though Black students represent 1/5 of the population. When you look at our nurse to student ratio, one nurse for 1,600 students, or maybe slightly better, thanks to Councilmember Alvarez and the actions that the Joint Committee, ENC and HHS took to add 6 more nurses to try to put a dent in that very large and worst in the region, one of the worst in the region gaps. When you look at the counselor to student ratio, one counselor to 250 students. And when you ask students what they need, when you look at the suicides, we talked about expanding mental health services through Every Mind, which we did and added money today. This is a choice that we are making to fund this type of program, $3 million program, over investments in counselors, mental health professionals, and the like. This is not to say that our SROs are not good people and don't care about kids. As I've said many times, I know many of them, and I think many of them are and do. The question is, what is the right tool, the right resource for our students in a school environment, especially considering the moment in time we're in, where we have COVID, kids aren't in school, obviously we're in the summer now, but we also are dealing with the social unrest following the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Fanon Berhe and Ahmaud Arbery at the hands of police and so many others. And, you know, I've 4 interns that just started in my office recently, all Montgomery County Public High School students, who said they think resources would be better spent on keeping things that they need, counselors, mental health professionals, better training even for security staff. And when you look at the data, and we know those things that I just mentioned do help children achieve and do better, and we have these disparities, the urgency to act is now. I think we're in a good situation to remove these positions right now because we know that school is most likely not going to be back at least until the late fall, maybe even longer than that. And so as the school board and the school system work on their plans for what could be next or an alternative to the SRO program, I think this is the opportunity to lapse these positions and capture the savings and abolish them in the FY22 budget. And so what I proposed in the committee was to remove the whole program, but after talking with colleagues and speaking with other interested parties, what I am moving today, because of everything that I've stated, is that we would eliminate 12 of the 23 SRO positions. So that gives flexibility to the school system if, for example, school were to come back in the very unlikely event that they could have adequate coverage and still be moving forward with their plans that are not set to be reported back until February. And so that would give, I think, maximum flexibility, but also send a strong message that we need to end this program and invest those savings, which we could recoup in FY22, in programs that are proven to help our students and that will not harm our students in the way that this is disproportionately harming our students of color. So that is my motion to eliminate 12 and lapse 12 of the positions with looking to abolish them in FY22.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Jawando, seconded by Councilmember, was that? Who seconded? Councilmember Reamer. Okay, Councilmember Rice.
Well, thank you very much. So let me just say this, and I'm not even going to speak to the merits of the SRO program. I think just fundamentally from a functional standpoint, we are being very disrespectful here. The school system, the school board, the school superintendent have said and met with the public and said that they are going through a process to determine, in speaking to stakeholders, their stakeholders, right? Their stakeholders, they are elected to represent the school system. They are the ones who have said they wanted to embark on this. Nobody forced them to do this. That's what they opted to do. And for us to then jump in and say, well, we're going to do it differently and not listen to you, I believe is incredibly disrespectful. I do believe come January, when there is a report that's generated and the school system has decided, then we can have a very robust discussion about this. But to do anything before then, I feel, again, is not respectful to our school system, to those elected leaders, and to our superintendent and to the parents, quite honestly, because parents haven't had a chance to weigh in. We haven't heard from folks who have talked about this at all and talked about the concerns they have. I know that just as Councilmember Duando has received numerous emails from parents who are concerned about the program, I've received numerous emails from folks that are concerned about the program, as well as that wholeheartedly support the program. Long letters detailing why it is that they believe. But like I said again, we shouldn't be talking about the merits. We should just be talking about, at this point, a process that's already underway. And so as chair of the Education and Culture Committee, I can tell you that just from that standpoint alone, I believe that this is premature, that certainly once we get to January, which is not that far away, we certainly will have a very robust discussion about this in the Education and Culture Committee that I chair. And I'm very happy to then look towards having that discussion with our public safety members, as well with our joint meeting like we always do to discuss school resource officers, and we can make an appropriate decision at that time. So thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Council Member Albernauz.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll try to be brief. I made these comments in committee, but I think they are relevant to this discussion before full council, and so I will repeat some of what I said in the committee, and that is to explain the context from which I'm coming from in my interest and background on this specific issue. So as all of you know, I used to be the director of the Recreation Department, and while I was there, we significantly expanded the number of after-school programs across the county in partnership with the council to be able to create more positive youth development opportunities in Montgomery County. And so I got to really know the school administrators, the nonprofit organizations, the teachers, the parents, and the SROs through that process. And it struck me how complex and important it is to have this broad, holistic support structure within these schools in order for them to be successful. And I can tell you that the SRO program was an important component of that overall structure. And while it's been pointed out that these are anecdotal stories, and that is true, there were numerous instances in which I directly know of SROs that intervened in gang situations and beefs to help dissipate them and prevent them from spiraling out of control. Situations in which students who did not feel comfortable going to anyone else in law enforcement but had an issue that was related to a criminal aspect in their life felt comfortable bringing that situation to an SRO who was able to intervene and in some cases stop domestic violence situations from moving forward. And there was no greater advocate for the after-school programs that we had in our schools than the SROs themselves. And they were the ones that often identified students and encouraged them to participate and recommended them for our programs. I can also speak in the first person about the training that they received, both on the front end, but also the Advancing Youth Development training that we offered through the Recreation Department and Collaboration Council, that the SROs were so hungry for that they participated more than once. And so I think that there is no question that I am open to and very much recognize the moment that we are in. And the data is very alarming. But I think that we have to look at this within a broader context of how the SROs fit into the overall model of the school. And at a minimum, give the Board of Education the opportunity to fully evaluate the program, talk to all the key stakeholders that Councilmember Rice referred to solicit feedback, And where I agree with you very much, Councilmember Jawando, is in rethinking how we have our SRO program. But that has to be an informed decision. And I think there needs to be at a minimum a transition plan if we are going to move forward with the elimination of the SRO program, to take into account all of those other positive elements that are associated with the program. And I have been concerned that a number of the arrests that we have referenced were for very serious offenses involving firearms. And it's been noted that patrols or the various districts could have responded to those situations, and it didn't have to be an SRO officer. But because of the relationships that the SRO officer has with the school administrators and with many of the students, I have to believe that there was a better outcome because of those relationships under very difficult circumstances. And so we do need to think about the implications of the public safety components of this and have a reasonable plan moving forward. And I do think that the other argument with the pandemic is that I agree that there's urgency to meet this moment that we are in. And I understand how that's being used as an argument for moving forward with the reductions now. But I actually think that reinforces the argument that we actually, that gives us even more time to be able to fully process and evaluate this program and look at it from all sides, have a robust discussion. And the data that we have is limited. I acknowledge that. But that is precisely why I think it's important for us to conduct this wholesale evaluation. And while symbolism is important, I get that too. I think it's more important for us to take our time and fully assess what's going on with this program so that we can collectively make an informed decision moving forward. So I don't support the amendment. Do recognize we are going to need a change and evolution, but we need the time to evaluate what that's going to look like before just outright eliminating a component of the program, in my opinion. So thank you, Mr. President. And I respectfully disagree with this particular amendment, but will stand by Councilmember Jawando as we look forward, moving forward to evaluating how this program can be evolved in some way. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Navarro.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I think I have the unique distinction of having served on the Board of Education for 5 years, and I will share with you, and I think I've said this many times, that when I was a member of the board, had my reservations about the way that the SRO program was being implemented. That conversation led to refining the MOU, and it led to refinements of the training. And at this moment in time, understanding where we are and with the concerns that I still have regarding the disproportionality of our Black and Brown students when it comes to issues of arrest and discipline. I mean, this is something that we worked on for so many years. Some of us have been doing this for a long time. I do agree that this is a very important moment to rethink and evolve in how we balance the need to have security in our schools, while we also make sure that our students have the kinds of supports that actually elevate them versus create more tension. And so from my perspective, having been a member of the Board of Education, and I can say this because I'm sure the current members of the Board of Education won't say it, but I can, being super annoyed at times when other bodies thought that they could come and tell us, the members of the Board of Education, what needed to be done, when in reality, it is up to those members to provide the kind of oversight and put forth the policies and the initiatives necessary to run the schools. So from that perspective, number one, I do want to be absolutely respectful of the members of the board. It is imperative that they be allowed to take the time in collaboration with the superintendent to think through, what does this mean, right? So it's not about us taking a moment and being symbolic and saying, oh, this is a really good time, let's go ahead and get rid of the SROs, without having and now this. the now this piece is the part that I feel we need to have ready to go. That once the members of the board, in conjunction with the superintendent, parents, and students come up with some kind of model, that we can then take a look at that. And, we're just about to see the police advisory commission, et cetera. And then we can come together with our positive youth initiative and say, you know what, this model looks pretty good, or maybe we need to strengthen it this way, or perhaps we kind of add some more to it. And hey, parents, we are evolving from a strictly SRO model, police in the schools, as has been described, to this more holistic approach. And that's what I shared with you, Councilmember Jawando, last Sunday, that's where I am. I'm excited that the Board of Education is doing this comprehensive work. I think it's great. I think it's time. I do agree with that. The time has come for us to think about what fits Montgomery County 2020, right? Taking into consideration all the data that we have, all the work that we've done. I think it is time to say, now this is what we're going to put forth. It's holistic. It responds to many of the things that we have heard, and it respects the work of the Board of Education. So the sense of urgency, I'm not understanding, because again, school is not in session. The board is already doing the work. We're about to sit the Police Advisory Commission. We have time. And that's what I share with you, Councilmember Jawando. We do have time to be able to signal that, yes, we're on record saying that we want something new, and then allow the Board of Education to do that work and us coming back. So that's where I am. I haven't changed my mind since Sunday because, again, I believe in systemic change and thoughtful change. I worry sometimes when there are decisions made just to kind of make a statement without having thought through what the implications are. And let's not forget that we have a very large school system. Councilmember Albornoz and Councilmember Craig Rice touched on an issue that has always stood out for me. And it was, hearing about gang leadership trying to recruit kids in middle school, in playgrounds and things like that. So we have a very complex issue. And what I want to know is that we have come up with a model that integrates all of those needs, and it's balanced. And so that's why I won't be supporting this particular proposal. But I do look forward to the results of the work of the Board of Education and rolling up our sleeves to come up with a model that actually makes sense and fits our needs. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me jump in as well. I certainly am not supportive of this amendment. I associate myself with what's been said in many ways. Councilmember Rice, Councilmember Alvarez, and Councilmember Navarro have all said it. But the Board of Education needs to be allowed to give us what their suggestions are and what they would like. It would be disrespectful of us for us to decide before they can decide. And I believe that they have every right and should have every right. If they come back and tell us they don't want the school resource officers, then our discussion is moot. If they come back and say, you know what, we do want them, but we want them in a different way, Montgomery County could easily become the new model. We could easily become the new prototype. So when someone talks about school resource officers, they don't say how bad it was in Colorado or some other place. They say how good it is in Montgomery County, Maryland. And if they decide that we need to work together, we need to. And oh, by the way, we're just now, hopefully next meeting, we'll be voting on a policing advisory commission. Let them do their work. We have worked hard. We have worked hard to try to get an unbelievable body together to work on issues just like this one. And we're saying we're going to make the decisions before they even have a chance to even meet each other. They don't even know who's going to be on that body yet. So that is, to me, putting the cart way in front of the horse. We need to wait and figure out what we have. And if things change, then absolutely we should change with it. But if we have systems in place, let the systems stay in place until we can come together and know what the best solutions are on this issue. And with that, Councilmember Reamer, please.
Thank you. Well, I've been working on this issue for a long time, and I've been proud to support Councilmember Rice, in his advocacy for this program over the years. And I will say I've always had some, concerns in the back of my mind, but they've come to the floor of my mind, over the past year. And I've been advocating to eliminate this program. And I think there's a bit of a misconception here that this is the Board of Education's policy. This is the County Council's policy. We are the ones who have, expanded it. We've funded it year after year steadily, adding positions. So I actually think that the more appropriate question is to provide the direction to the Board of Education as to what the County Council wants, and then seek their guidance as to how they would reflect, the policy and what resources they would ask from us. I think we all want the same thing. I think what we all want is an adult who is a mentor, who is someone that a kid can go to when they're having a crisis, when they need help, someone who knows how to access public safety resources, if that is what the situation calls for, or someone who also is a badly needed, guide, an angel on the shoulder, just an adult who can talk and listen and share guidance. And I think that we often are trying to put a square peg into a round hole by asking the police officer to be all those things. And I think that the officer can be those things. I think that it's possible. But I also think that other types of training and personnel would be more effective. And I think that all the benefits that we're seeking from the program, I think we could probably get that and more from a different type of program. And that is the kind of foundational shift that I have had, because I really do share the passion for, that kids need somebody to talk to. I've been at points in my life where I needed somebody to talk to when I was young. A different situation, of course, but I can relate to that human need. And so I think that the result of the Board of Education's inquiry will be inconclusive, that they will essentially ask us what we would like to do. And so I think we should, just take a stand and say what we want. But in any event, this is a very challenging topic. There are, to acknowledge Councilmember Albornoz's point, there have been some serious issues with guns. It's not clear to me that an officer, who is from that area couldn't have responded in just as timely a manner. And the last thing we want to do is, leave people concerned that their kids aren't safe at school. I think that's a very serious consideration. But I continue to believe that a kind of a counselor, mentor type person would be the most effective. I think a lot of kids will actually hesitate to talk to a police officer. They might not hesitate to talk to somebody else. And I just want to say, this is complicated. Everybody has the right intentions. This is not an issue where one group of people really wants to just, harm our youth. Like everybody wants the same thing. We just have different means of trying to get there. So I do support the motion. I don't know that we have the votes today, but we'll keep working on it.
Thank you, Councilmember Glass.
Thank you, Mr. President. The council was recently briefed on, nearly $192 million in revenue reductions that we're going to be facing this fiscal year. And that's why we're having this discussion now on, a little more than $43 million in reductions. And I suspect that we'll be having to make more cuts and have more tough conversations in the weeks and months to come as this health and economic pandemic continue. But today we've been having a lot of conversations about public safety and the need to rethink public safety to ensure that every resident and every child and every student is safe, and that these individuals, that our residents here in Montgomery County are safe, whether they're at home, out in public, or in their schools. And as we take on this conversation and continue talking about it with all the stakeholders that everybody has referenced, I appreciate the comments that Councilmember Reamer just said, because we're all on the same page and we want to make sure that everybody is safe. And I think the fact that school is not going to be in session this fall, I think that provides the opportunity to make these needed changes. I think now is the time to share with the Board of Education and with MCPS leadership that changes need to be made while we're not in school, while we're figuring out what the future of public education might be, or at least in-person public education, instead of waiting for kids to go back into schools. As we face other budget cuts as well. So I really think that now is the time, and the council has clearly identified mental health as an issue that we all care about, and mental health services are extremely vital to all of our residents. And we've increased the mobile health units, and we've expanded opportunities for nonprofit partners like Every Mind, and there are more mental health services that we all know that we need. And I think students also need more mental health services. They also need more counselors, which has been identified by all of us. And I think they need a little less policing. And so the crisis that we're in, I think, actually provides us with the exact opportunity to make some of the tough budgetary decisions we're forced to make, and recognize that while kids are not in school, it provides school leadership with an even longer amount of time to plan for when kids come back to school. And that means rethinking how we provide positive youth development in our hallways, outside of the lockers, and in our classrooms. And so it doesn't need to be a cop, but we need to have those conversations. And I think, I'm supporting this motion clearly, and I think it would give an important signal to school leadership to use this time wisely. And there will be no other time like now, when kids are not in school for a prolonged amount of time, and budget cuts to this level of economic proportion. So thank you for everybody for, again, having an important conversation just about how we make our kids feel safe, so that ultimately they can all learn in the classroom. And as I said, I will be supporting this motion. I yield back, Mr. President.
Thank you. Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I appreciate all my colleagues' comments, and I do agree that we all want the same thing. We all want our kids with trusting adults, safe, learning in the best way possible, and so I feel very confident about that. Couple points that have been made I just wanted to address. The reason I modified my proposal from the Public Safety Committee is to provide maximum flexibility to the school board. And I have some of my best friends in the world on the school board that I've served with in many capacities for a number of years. And so in no way do I underestimate or devalue their role and their great responsibility. Actually, I've been very open about wanting to pay them more and give them more staff and help them do their job more easily. I do think this is a clear-cut case. Councilmember Reamer alluded to this. We control the police budget. The council has been the driver of increasing this program. And if the school system, for example, if we were to move all the money tomorrow, if they still wanted to have an MOU with the police department and use their funding to do so, they could proceed in that way. So it doesn't take any authority away from them. But it does signal that as a body, we make budgetary decisions, and those are choices. And by lapsing this program, that is going to free up next year money that we can use to invest in critical things that our students in our community and their families need. And all the things that have been mentioned around intervention and trusted adults, these are all functions that mental health professionals or people who are trained to do these things can and are doing. I think it's important to say they are doing it. One of the people I have the most respect for in the world is a gentleman named Cedric Boatman, who was the cluster security coordinator at Blair for many years and an All-American basketball player at Blair in the 70s. And the relationships, you talk about anecdotal stories. I could talk all day and night about the kids that he's impacted and helped with very difficult situations. Not a police officer, never been one, and has helped many, many students. And so it's not a question of can a police officer serve a positive role? Of course they can. Some of my best friends in life are police officers. Wayne Farrell, who was a police officer in this county for many years and whose wife's worked for the system, is the one who got me to be an AmeriCorps member and work at the Montgomery County Police Department. I think the only one on the council that's done that. So it's not about whether they can or should be nice people. It's about what is the best resource in a time where we had very, very precious resources and we have very few. I think it's also important to note the students. The last 3 student school board members, all unanimously, who are very different in their demographic, elected by the student body in different years, all oppose the SRO program and think it should be repurposed and that the money should be used elsewhere. They are working on an op-ed to say that. That should probably come out shortly. And this would give the transition plan allowed. Since we've been having this conversation, since we started this topic, the school system confirmed in a letter to folks that they are not going back until at least November. And the way it's phrased, it says they will reassess in November 2020 what the plan is. And so this allows the perfect amount of time, to Councilmember Glass's point, for them to figure out what's next. And even if they want to bring this back in some form or fashion, there are still officers that can cover 1 or 2 schools, which is done. The nurses are covering a heck of a lot more. I'll tell you that. And so I think there is maximum flexibility here, and we need to send this signal now. The last thing I'll say is to the point that was made about the PAC. The Police Advisory Commission, I look forward to them. They are very qualified. They will have a chance to weigh in on a whole range of these issues, including this issue, because the final determination of how we move forward in reimagining public safety, including our schools, will not be determined whether or not we take this action today. They will weigh in on it. But the idea that we wouldn't act on the use of force policy, for example, because the PAC hasn't chimed in, I don't think we can use that every time. We're going to get their input as we go along. I'm a big supporter of that bill, and I think they're going to have great input. But we need to move forward. And as was said by one of the nominees to that committee, or many of them, but one in particular that I'm thinking of, we have to think of the mental health and the impact after George Floyd, after Breonna Taylor, after all the things that have happened, of students coming back to school in February or March, or January, whenever it is, and having to deal with seeing police officers in the moment in time in history we are. We cannot. That is an urgent thing, and I think we need to move. And the final thing I'll say, the data is very clear on this. I've been working on this since I was a young lawyer working at the NAACP 17 years ago. The data on SROs everywhere, and there's slight variations, has been disproportionate. The data on what mental health professionals, counselors, nurses, properly trained security staff can do is also clear. And so the idea that we need more study on this, we don't. There's models out there. The school board will certainly give input on that. They have the time to do so. We need to get these savings now and make this change right now. And it's our proper role. It's a thoughtful thing to do. And I hope that colleagues will consider supporting it. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilmember Navarro.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm not going to belabor the point. I think that it's clear that everybody has already signaled to the Board of Education that we expect something different. If we want to signal something more specific, I think the Education and Culture Committee with the Public Safety Committee can come together and delineate a model, just like we did with the health initiative for Latino community in 9 days, that we would love for them to see. But to literally dismiss the work of the Board of Education by creating some artificial urgency when we just saw the school system saying that for the first semester they're going to be virtual, it just doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, everybody has pretty much said the same thing, that we would like to have a different model. We would like to be able to fund a different model. We've been meeting on the Cahoots program and with the Sante group about some other things. So everything else has been very deliberate. And I take issue with this characterization that somehow, the council, that some members of the council are not listening to the students, and the students are going to write an op-ed, and somehow if we don't make this decision right now, we're against it. That is totally not true. For the record, I think I can count, and I think I have heard a majority of my colleagues say, because we've said this before, that we want to see something different, that we expect something different. I think our decisions that we've made have signaled very clearly that we're making a lot of changes. From my perspective, I don't understand the urgency, given the fact that the esteemed Board of Education, which I don't think they need for us to tell them what to do. I think they're pretty, incredible professionals with the backing of the MCPS staff, can tell us what they think would best work and fit given where we are right now. And we can then take that information and we can make decisions. But to make a decision like this when, I haven't seen the report about how much are these positions are lapsed? Can we actually make decisions like this? Are we firing people? Like, there's just a lot. And there is no urgency because there is a process going on right now, which is so significant that will yield a completely new model. I think that's an amazing thing for our county. So again, I just want to be on record because, there's just this rush for sound bites. I want to be on record that I absolutely expect for there to be something different that we can all look at, that we can fund, just like we have already made a lot of decisions in a deliberate way to move ourselves into a students are not yet time.
Your sound is not working.
Together and put something amazing and okay.
Nancy, your sound is not
that
working.
is the response we have been elected to do, which is to make informed decisions in a deliberate way with public input. And I am sure that we will come up with a really awesome model that provides the safety at the same time and provides the support that our students and our families need.
Thank you very much. For a moment, it looked like you were going to pull a Craig Rice, but you didn't. Yeah.
I was worried about that.
Next is Councilmember Friedson, please.
Yeah, Councilmember Navarro nearly pulled a Craig Rice, who pulled a Councilmember Reamer. So
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
I appreciate everybody's comments here. I think that there is a lot of agreement on ultimately where we will end up and where we want to go. I think there's a question of what the best process of moving that forward and what the timing of it is. I totally appreciate the urgency, but I also have some concerns and still don't fully understand how this would work, what the impact would be on people who are encumbered in specific positions, what positions they would be moving into, what the thoughts of the county executive who didn't propose this in the savings plan that we have before us, what the school system's approach is, how that interfaces with state law, and what the coverage is, and what the impacts are, and how we're going to address some of the important work that is done in a more appropriate way. I think that there is an answer to all of those questions. I think there is a path forward which addresses them, but it just the fact that we have appropriated funds and put these positions into our budget and made a statement when we did it, right, wrong, or indifferent, only a couple of months ago, and then would be coming back in the absence of a savings plan and moving it forward essentially at the dais here without fully fleshing these out with the robust policy conversation and all of the unintended consequences that go along with it, feels a little bit imprudent to me, although I totally appreciate where the thought process is here and the fact that I think that there's more agreement here than disagreement, frankly, on where we want to go. I did just have a point of clarification because I didn't fully understand this and don't understand it. I think it's relevant as we take up this savings plan and prepare potentially to take up more, unfortunately, given the fiscal climate that we're in and the revenue projections and the fact that the savings plan that we have before us does not quite meet what we expect, although we hope that there will be some changes before we ultimately have to get there. But I always thought that the county council is responsible for appropriating funds, and savings plans come from the county executive, that the county council doesn't unappropriate funds, so to speak. And if a savings plan came over, we could move around where the cuts were coming from, but to unappropriate something that we had already appropriated in another context would not be seen as something that is legally allowed. And I'm just curious as to how it's different here and up to what point it would be allowed and whether or not we'd be doing this. Because this would be, and it doesn't look like we're heading in this direction, but what's being proposed here would be a substantial increase to the cut that was proposed for this department by the county executive. And I'm just curious, as we move forward, to what point is that permissible and how does that process work? And I don't know if Ms. Michelson or if we have a county attorney a council attorney who could help us, but I would just be particularly interested in the answer to that question.
Well, I don't know if one of our attorneys is on the line, so I love offering legal opinions without any training to do so.
Doesn't stop us, Ms. Michelson, so it shouldn't have to stop you.
I was going to say, all of us do that, yes.
But my view is when the county executive submits a savings plan, the council can modify it, that you can't initiate one and unappropriate money without his initiating it, but you are not obligated to take the cuts as he's proposed it. And as you've seen from the committee's recommendations, you haven't accepted some of the cuts he's proposed. I would say that you can add some as well. And if there is an attorney still on the line who wants to offer an additional view, I'll turn it to them.
We don't have to do it here, but I think it would be helpful if we had a memo from either the county attorney or legislative attorneys to explain that. I mean, I understand in the context of within the confines of the savings plan itself, and we certainly can reject anything that is sent over, and I think we could move things around. But, hypothetically, if a $20 million savings plan came over, could we cut $200 million? That would be a far different approach. And I think, at what line does that become an unappropriation of funds, which is not permissible? It blurs the lines of the executive branch and the legislative branch under the charter as far as I'm aware. And so I just would be helpful to understand what are the confines under which we're operating as we take up savings plans, what is permissible, what's not permissible, what's the magnitude of the changes that we can and should consider. But we don't have to flesh that out now, but I think it would be helpful to have that memo perhaps as we head into next week, maybe even as part of the packet as we take the final vote on this. I
will get one of our county
attorneys. Marlene, I'm here.
There you go.
I don't know if I have all the answers, but I do have some questions. I mean, is this motion to abolish and riff these positions? I mean, and put these people out on the street, or are you just trying to move them? If you're moving them, there's no savings. I'm not really sure what you're suggesting in the motion.
I don't know if that's a question or, I mean,
question.
I wrote a memo that said, and I said when I introduced the motion that it was to lapse and look to abolish in 2022, which is the same recommendation that staff made for other positions in the public safety budget. And I did consult with the county attorney about the authority I'm an attorney myself, obviously, about the authority to act and move within a savings plan. But as I stated, the motion is to lapse this year, half of the positions, or roughly half, and they would be reassigned, not RIFed. There are 40 vacancies at the department, which are being used for the other reductions that the county executive sent over. So these folks would be reassigned, and then the positions could be abolished when we take up the full budget next year, and then the savings would be actualized.
But there would be
Appreciate
no
it.
savings
Just to
this year.
clarify, I wasn't.
There are some operational savings this year, though.
I wasn't questioning the specific action here. I was just raising the broader question because it raised an issue and a question for me. And I think we are going to be dealing with broader issues and broader questions. And I think it's important to set expectations as well for residents of, you know, what we can and can't do, and what, you know, what the confines are of what we're doing. So perhaps we can get that memo, Mr. Drummer, and I don't have to have the full-fledged discussion here, but I think it would be helpful to describe. And I'll just close by saying, you know, I really do think that we need the county executive, we need the police chief, we need the school system. I think the committees of jurisdiction would be helpful to have, you know, significant discussions here. I think it's not just a question of if and when, but also how. And, you know, I think there still are some unanswered questions that we have to work through. But like I said, I think there are answers to all those questions. We just have to take the time to get there, and do appreciate everybody's comments. And I won't be supporting the motion, but do appreciate the reason why it was put forward.
And I did want to be clear on what the staff's recommendations were. That it says the council should consider whether these positions should be consider whether these positions should be abolished as a part of the FY22 budget. It did not say that we should abolish. It said we should consider, and that would be part of the discussions. And the last person who's going to speak at this moment on this topic is Councilmember Rice.
So I'm really appreciative. As a person who started off when I first joined this council and ended up being one of the renowned advocates for school resource officers, but it was actually before I joined this council. Back when Councilmember Hucker and I served in Annapolis, I was the lead sponsor of a bill that talked about dealing with cultural competency training for school resource officers throughout the state of Maryland. And so this has always been something that's been important to me since the very beginning of elected office, and that is understanding that there needs to be a better relationship with our police officers in our community. The reality is this, is that I don't think that any of us on this council are actually saying we're going to do away with our police department. I haven't heard that as of yet. And so because of that, my thought is, what kind of a better way can we establish a positive working relationship between our young people and our police department than having positive interactions? Now, I certainly understand there are concerns about what those interactions may be. And so we have to be very forthright in terms of how it is we're going to structure those interactions. We have to make sure that they're very, very positive. We have to make sure that they're constrained in terms of the ability for them to go south and go bad, all of those kinds of things. So that truly means that we're going to re-envision our school resource officer program. There's no way in which we can continue it the way it is right now and still in true fidelity hold up to those sorts of standards. So again, as I told Councilmember Joando in text messages and on the phone as we talk, I'm ready and willing to roll up my sleeves and work with anyone who really wants to see a re-envisioning of our school resource officer program and how we can make it better for our students. I will just say this. There is a silent group out there, a lot of parents and children who believe in our school resource officer program, who are also an important part of this mix. I truly respect every one of our 3 SMOBs. There's no question about it. But we have 163,000 students in Montgomery County Public Schools, not 3. And so let me just be very clear, and their voices matter. And just as we as elected officials are responsible for reaching out to all of them and asking our constituents what they want and what they need and what they see, I would encourage our student members of the board to do that. In fact, I had a conversation with our former county council member for a day, and Nick Asante, the new incoming school student member of the board, about this particular subject. I will tell you that it's just very interesting. In different conversations, you're going to come away with different takeaways. And I certainly understand that. Every conversation is different. Every context is different. But let me just say this at the end of the day. I think that, again, us working with the school board, us working with stakeholders, can really come up with a re-envisioned, reimagined program that delivers on what Councilmember Reamer talked about. I mean, it was very interesting because as Councilmember Reamer was talking, I was saying to myself, that's exactly what we need to do. But it doesn't mean that we abolish the program. It just means that we develop it. I mean, there's nothing that you don't have to abolish something to change it, right? You can actually just change it. And so let's change it. Let's work together, all of us, because we've all said we want to see it changed. We want to see something that works for our students. We want to see something that supports safety in our schools. We want to see something that's respectful of the concerns that many people have in our school system about having a officer in an all-black uniform and gun walking up and down the hallways. We all get all of that. No one doesn't understand that. There's a way in which we can work together to a compromise, and I look forward to working with you guys to make that happen. So thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilmember Giwando.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll be very brief. I appreciate Councilmember Rice's point, and as I said, always willing to talk. Appreciate all my colleagues. I do think there is a baseline question, and it was kind of embedded in what you just said. Should police officers be in schools as school resource officers in any form? I would say no. I think you would have a different answer, and I'm going to speak for you. And so there are big differences. I think what Councilman Reamer said and what I've said is, should there be caring adults that are qualified to meet students' needs? Yes. So I think those are different things. We'll have the discussion. I appreciate it. I'm glad we're moving forward. And the final thing, should police be in schools in a programmatic way so that police and community can get to know each other? Sure. That we all had that. The fire truck comes up. There's a school assembly where they can have real conversations. That's different than an enforcement role opportunity, which is what the SRO program is. So just a lot of things to consider. But thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. It has been moved by Councilmember Giwando, seconded by Councilmember Reamer Councilmember Giwando, did you want to restate what your actual amendment? It seems like forever ago.
Sure. To lapse 12 of the 23 active SROs in this budget and look to abolish in the FY22 budget.
Oh, thank you. All those in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand. And it is Councilmember Vice President Hucker, Councilmember Reamer, Councilmember Giwando, Councilmember Glass. All those opposed to the amendment, please raise your hand. It is Councilmember Friedson, Councilmember Rice, Councilmember Navarro, Councilmember Albanaz, and Councilmember Katz. The motion fails 5-4. Thank you very much.